I chose to do my case conceptualization on the show Fleabag, which is a comedy about a unnamed 33-year-old Caucasian single woman who lives in London.
I opened the cafe with my friend Boo. Yeah, she's dead now.
Thank you for coming in today. That kind of thing won't get you very far here anymore.
I suppose you should meet Hillary.
She's beautiful.
Mum died 3 years ago.
Did you take the sculpture?
What sculpture? Martin's being lovely.
I am not drunk.
Always drunk.
People make mistakes.
Your husband tried to kiss me on your birthday.
I'm just going to say this once.
He didn't try to kiss you. He says it was more like the other way around.
How do you believe me?
How can I believe you?
Because I'm your sister.
After what you did to Boo?
I'm sorry.
You should go.
In the show, the main character, who in the credits is referred to as Fleabag, is a young woman who is dealing with a lot of emotional turmoil following the death of her very close friend and roommate.
Yeah, she's dead now. She accidentally killed herself. It wasn't her intention, but it wasn't a total accident. She didn't actually think she'd die. She just found out that her boyfriend fucked someone else and wanted to punish him by ending up in hospital and not letting him visit her for a bit. She decided to walk into a busy cycle lane, wanting to get tangled in a bike, break a finger maybe. As it turns out, bikes go fast and flip you into the road. 3 people died.
We find out that she used to run a coffee shop with her friend, and that since her passing, it has not performed well and her lease is about to expire. She lives alone and she's having some financial hardship trying to keep the shop alive. Her remaining family consists of her sister, her father, and her godmother.
Dad's way of coping with 2 motherless daughters was to buy us tickets to feminist lectures, start fucking our godmother, and eventually stop calling.
Her presenting problems arriving in therapy would be that she's had a series of tumultuous interpersonal relationships. She is self-described as being near obsessed with sex.
I'm not obsessed with sex. I just can't stop thinking about it.
And has this uncontrollable desire to be seen as physically desirable by others, to the point of cheating both in her own relationships and in the relationships of her friends and family. Really, one of her biggest issues would be stress, emotional stress following the death of her friend Boo, lingering bereavement for her mother, financial stress regarding the coffee shop and not wanting to give that up, having that lingering attachment to her best friend, and in a sense, feeling like she might be letting her friend down or her memory by letting go of the shop. And she also seems to have an inability to control herself in a number of social situations where she ends up acting out and egging on the people around her.
Just a flash poo and prep.
Christ, did you wash your hands?
Of course not. Oh my God!
She generally presents as a pretty physically fit person. We see that she jogs daily, though she does smoke. Her mother died of breast cancer, so she and her sister get regularly checked.
Your father informed me of your family history.
Yeah, evil boobs everywhere.
And we do get some hints that there is some mental health issues in the family. While it's not confirmed, there are mentions that her sister might be bulimic.
My sister. She's uptight and beautiful and probably anorexic, but clothes look awesome on her, so.
And a lot of Fleabag's maladaptive behaviors are referenced as being traits that she got from her mother, which implies that her mom might have been struggling with similar issues, if not the very same ones.
I have a horrible feeling that I'm a greedy, perverted, selfish, apathetic, cynical, depraved, morally bankrupt woman who can't even call herself a feminist.
You get all that from your mother.
Good one.
Despite living close to her family, it becomes very clear that she doesn't have a lot of social support from them. Her father is emotionally distant, and we have an interaction pretty early on where he makes an excuse and ultimately doesn't offer to help her with her financial situation.
Well, the lease is up in a couple of days, and I don't think I can really afford to. I think I'm just going to have to accept that it's...
I'm sorry about that, darling, but of course we're just a little bit tight on the purse strings.
Oh, no, I wasn't asking you for any...
We've just been keeping it quiet. We haven't been able to buy anything or do anything.
What's that?
Oh, that's just a tiny little house we're buying in France.
We see that her sister is pretty well off, but Fleabag seems too embarrassed or self-conscious to be able to ask her for help.
The only thing harder than having to tell your super high-powered, perfect, anorexic, rich super sister that you've run out of money is having to ask her to bail you out. I'm just going to ask her. I'm just going to come.
Do you need to borrow money?
No. Can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it.
She also, in the first episode, attempts to take out a small business loan, but unfortunately flunks the interview.
Okay. Please leave.
You don't understand. I need this loan.
Please just leave.
Perv.
Slut.
Wow.
We also see her breaking off with her longtime on-again, off-again boyfriend at the very beginning of the season, and she's self-described as being kind of on her own at this point.
So, yeah, kind of on my own.
And I do think it's kind of worth mentioning that despite the fact that the show presents this main character as likable and you want to care for her, you do get a sense that it's probably very difficult living with her and her behaviors and tendencies. So for as much as we feel compassion towards her and are at times annoyed by some of the other characters' behaviors, you can't really blame them for setting up these boundaries, both emotionally and financially, with such a kind of off-the-wall wild card of an individual. Resources and spiritual factors, we again see very limited amounts of help that this character is getting. She's not religious. She calls herself an atheist.
Well, I don't believe in God.
I love it when he does that.
Even though she does seem to have a bit of a crisis of faith at one point in the second season. She's in such dire financial situation that she actually resorts to stealing from her godmother.
It's very valuable, actually.
How much?
Thousands.
Can I have it?
Who is a pretty well-known and established artist within the reality of the TV show. And she steals this small gold idol that kind of becomes a running gag throughout the show, that she keeps stealing it and returning it, and then other people put it back. But initially what motivated the original theft was that she was going to fence it.
Did you take the sculpture?
No. What sculpture?
Really, the only structured support she gets is that she does go to these feminist seminars that her father has paid for, that she and her sister both attend.
Please raise your hands if you would trade 5 years of your life for the so-called perfect body.
We are bad feminists.
I do think it's kind of interesting that some of the behaviors that you can tell by the other characters' reaction are seen as really like out there and intense and very much a social no-pa within the culture don't seem that problematic to me. And I do think that's kind of funny, and that's probably a bit of a cultural and diversity consideration in that the show takes place in London and all of the characters are British.
Do you want to go for a drink?
And I do think that some of the stereotypes are true, that Americans tend to just be a lot more emotive and emotional, and that's probably something that we would have to take into consideration if we were working with a client who was raised and living in an environment where the expectation is to be a lot more reserved, a lot more emotionally stable and in control, and keep a lot of that turmoil internal. So all of the issues that the character is tackling really come to a head in this one evening where she's at an art exhibit for her godmother. The man she's dating dumps her. She runs into her ex, who is seen as having moved on. She has a confrontation with her sister where she finds out that her brother-in-law has accused her of having tried to seduce him. She has a very public breakdown. That results in both her father and godmother reprimanding her.
I'm just going to say this once. I deserve to be happy. I am allowed to move on.
And that results in her just getting further emotionally keyed up, getting drunk, and walking around the city in just this drunk stupor and this very emotionally vulnerable state.
I can't come to the phone right now, but please leave me a message.
And there's this one really striking image of her with her hair a mess and her makeup all smudged, and she's clearly been crying and walking around all night in this very emotionally vulnerable, pained state of consciousness. And I think that's probably where you get some of the most colorful imagery that I think you could really use for the mental status exam. So seeing her in this state, she's obviously well-dressed, but her grooming and her makeup are all very smudged. Her level of alertness seems to be kind of fading in and out. She's obviously emotionally in disarray. And she ends up having this interaction with a character that she's met previously, and that's where you kind of get this big, beautifully written and acted soliloquy where you kind of hear once and for all and get all of the kind of missing pieces about what she's going through and what she's kind of experiencing.
I also fucked it into liquidation. And I fucked up my family. And I fucked my friend by fucking her boyfriend. And sometimes I wish I didn't even know that fucking existed. And that I know that my body, as it is now, really is the only thing I have left. And when that gets old and unfuckable, I may as well just kill it. And somehow there isn't anything worse than someone who doesn't want to fuck me. That I fuck everything. Either everyone feels like this a little bit and they're just not talking about it, or I am completely fucking alone. Which isn't fucking funny.
So from that speech, we can see that her eye contact is pretty poor. She's pretty reactive. She's having a couple of tics. She's crying. She's pretty restless. She's moving her hands a lot. She has a lot of kind of tremors. Her quality of speech is very pressured and talkative. The volume shifts but kind of builds, and it is very much in accordance with what she seems to be feeling. That being said, it is very coherent and fluent. Her prevalent emotional state is obviously a mix of pain and sadness and hurt. She's very dysphoric. I would say her affect is pretty blunted and definitely very congruent with the way that she's feeling. Her thought process is tight, judgment is sound, very linear thinking. We do get some flight of ideas, but I do think that it all, it follows internally, and she is able to articulate where the thoughts kind of connect. She is very evidently dealing with some suicidal thoughts and preoccupations. She's been having, throughout that episode, a lot of intrusive thoughts and flashbacks and memories to the situation that caused her friend to commit suicide, which clearly makes her feel exceptionally guilty since she played a part in that. And prior to the delivery of that speech, you do see that she probably was about to go through with her plan to kill herself in a similar fashion to the way that her friend tragically died. Once she is kind of aroused from that stupor, she is able to focus, she is able to be attentive. She does seem to have actually impeccable insight and awareness about what she's feeling internally, and it's clearly something that has been eating away at her at a long time. So when she finally does express it, she does so in a very eloquent, very poignant, very concrete manner. Her memory is intact, her orientation to time and place are intact, her insight and judgment appear good. And while she is having some flashbacks, I would not describe them as either hallucinations or delusions. All right, magnum opus, here we go. Preliminary DSM-5 diagnosis. Really, this TV show is billed as a comedy, but it is so smartly written, and there is clearly so much going on internally with the development of the character, and it's very rich, and that's why I'm pretty confident in my conclusion that I think this character suffers from borderline personality disorder. She's all but defined by her unstable interpersonal relationships, her fear of abandonment that she has experienced just time and time again, first with the loss of her mother, then with the loss of her best friend, then with losing 2 boyfriends, and then ultimately ending the series with this fear that she's about to lose both her father and her sister, if not physically, then emotionally. We see that she has had a long history of reckless behavior and risk-taking in the form of all of the sex that she has and cheating and the emotional manipulations. She's shown to have some suicidal tendencies, emotionally reactive, maybe not in the sense that we would expect, but certainly within her own culture, and we can see that by the way that the other characters interact with her. We see that she's not very good at evaluating the needs of others. There's some examples of splitting, where her opinion about some of the men that she's dating changes on a dime.
Yeah, or we could just go back to mine.
Wow, thanks. I've actually got work tomorrow, but another drink
Oh, well,
here.
we can just go back to yours.
Got to be up really early, so.
Well, let's get you a cab in the morning.
It's ridiculous. I can't.
Okay, what the fuck is your problem?
Oh, nothing. I like you.
Okay, you're a dick.
She has absolutely no stability in terms of her emotional regulation or her ability to control some of her impulses and behaviors. She has a very low self-image. Her interpretation of herself is almost exclusively determined by how others around her view her, which leads to this very distorted sense of self where she is absolutely at the mercy of other people's opinions and is desperate for the attention and desire of those around her. She mentions feeling lonely and sad almost all of the time.
I just want to cry all the time.
She's constantly acting out. And lastly, what I find so interesting is the idea of detachment from reality. Really, the identity of the show is formed around the fact that the main character, Fleabag, will often break the fourth wall and speak directly to the camera.
We'll last a week.
In these moments, they are viewed as comedic and sort of serving to interact for the audience's benefit, but we get this very interesting addition in the second season where other characters start to notice her disengaging from her world, her reality, the world of the show, to speak with the unseen audience.
What was that?
What?
Where did you just go?
What?
You just went somewhere. There.
And the 2 times this is directly referenced is once when she sees a counselor who her father has paid for her to go see.
I have friends. Oh, so you do have someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And the second time is when speaking to a priest.
He's a bit annoying, actually.
What is that?
What?
That thing that you're doing. It's like you disappear.
And I just find it so interesting that the 2 times that the show decides to have other characters aware of the fact that she's disengaging herself from reality are performed by individuals who would, by their nature and by their profession, be keyed in and aware of other people's emotions and internal states. I just think that's a really neat little twist, and the fact that they were able to find a way to make that fourth wall break not just something entertaining to the audience, but actually something that is giving us information about the character, I just think is so clever and so neat. Other differentials that I would consider would be bipolar type 1, histrionic personality, depression, and either PTSD or acute stress, as we aren't really given an exact timeline on how long ago her friend had passed away. Dialectical behavior therapy obviously is kind of the go-to for borderline personality disorder, so obviously I would consider that for this client. I also think working on other behavior therapy and emotional regulation would be hugely beneficial, with her kind of dealing not just with the external results of her internal states, but actually trying to quell and find some peace internally. That way it's not just her fighting her nature. Because we do see in season 2 that she is kind of on her own attempted to remedy some of her own maladaptive tendencies. And we see that mostly through her adhering to abstinence.
Do you want to have sex?
No. Can I at least go down on you?
As well as having a strict exercise regime. We also see that she has redoubled her efforts to see that the cafe succeeds. That way she doesn't have to sell it.
Why is everyone talking to each other?
Oh, it's Chatty Wednesday. If you buy something, you have to have a chat with someone you don't know.
What?
To that effect, I think that she could benefit from some career counseling, possibly, to help her a little bit more with her shop. Also, maybe some CBT or ABA interventions to help her reduce the maladaptive behaviors and tendencies and impulses that she's experiencing. For goals, I think emotional regulation would be high on the list. I think helping the business to succeed. I also think just working a lot with her self-esteem. I do think we see a lot of negative self-talk.
I hate myself.
Which is expressed to us, again, as the audience, by Fleabag breaking the fourth wall and interacting directly with the camera. But we can also view that as kind of her internal monologue, and we see a lot of self-loathing, a lot of guilt, a lot of fear that she has kind of trained herself into thinking and feeling, and kind of working on addressing that, I think, would be really beneficial. I think in her case, the change has to start internally before she can more readily and more easily control these kind of impulses to act out. I also just think maybe encouraging her to expand her social supports would be a good idea. Maybe trying to find some kind of peer group. She does ultimately reconcile with her family, with her sister, with her father, and even come to an unsteady peace with her godmother, who had been really antagonistic with her throughout the entire series up until that point, which is all wonderful. But I do think that since she does have this tendency to have these tumultuous interpersonal relationships, expanding her peer group could be very helpful and might really help give her that sense of belonging that she really probably has not felt since the loss of her mother and her best friend. Fleabag's a really well-written show. I think getting to analyze this character was particularly rewarding because she is difficult. I think she would not be the model client, but I do think she would be someone who would really benefit from some counseling and who our profession could really help.